In this video, we're going to be learning about right triangle trigonometry. Right triangle because they have those little corners where we know it's 90 degrees. You can see that here and here. And on this big triangle, this little symbol means it is a right triangle. All right, so the goal here is to learn how to measure relationships and proportions and how to compare the different sides of a triangle that has a right angle. The first thing we're going to do is learn about sine. So sine, we write it like this, sine of x, and x is the angle that we're going to be referring to, called the reference angle. Sine of x equals opposite side over the hypotenuse. So opposite side is over here, it's right across from the x, over the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is going to be over here. It's the longest side of the triangle. It's this part. This is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always the longest side of the triangle. And that's how we find sine. So let's color code this a little bit. So the hypotenuse, it's this longest side, and then the opposite was the one that was right across from our angle, right across from our reference angle x. All right, let's do cosine. So this is how we write cosine when we're finding it. Cosine of x, our angle, it's going to be adjacent. So adjacent, that's a new word. Adjacent means it's the side that's right next to the x. It's right there on the side of it, so right here. So this is the adjacent. I'm going to color code that too. All right, so back to cosine. Cosine is adjacent over the hypotenuse again, so we're going to color code that. It's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Adjacent over the hypotenuse. Last new proportion that we're going to find is tangent. So we write it as tan x, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So this is the new ratio we're comparing. The opposite, the yellow one, over the adjacent, the blue one. So here's x, there's the opposite, and there's the adjacent. And now you know how to find sine, cosine, and tangent. Let's do an example. In this example, I have this right triangle, and I need to find sine of A. So this is the angle that we're going to be referring to. This is our reference angle. That's why I made it big red. We want to think about what is the opposite compared to A, what's the hypotenuse, and so on. All right, let's jump right in. So just to review, sine, we use the opposite of their angle. I'll just write op. Use the opposite over the hypotenuse. All right, hype. So op over hype. Let's color code this a bit. So opposite of A, it's the one right across from it. Over here, it's going to be 32. So our opposite is 32 over the hypotenuse. Now, which side is the hypotenuse here? So the hypotenuse is always the longest side of a triangle. It's always the longest side, and it's also right across from the right angle, or that little box. So this is our hypotenuse, 40. Let's color code that as well. So we've got 32 over 40. 32 over 40, and we can reduce this, divide both of them by 8. So 32 divided by 8, 4, 40 divided by 8 is 5. All right, got our nice little ratio there. Let's do cosine. So here's A. Cosine is the adjacent, put ADJ. So the adjacent, here's the adjacent to A over the hypotenuse again. So adjacent is 24. It's the one right next to it over the hypotenuse, 40. So 24 over 40. And if I reduce that, I get 6 over 10. Reduce it some more, and I get 3 out of 5. All right, done with that one. So last one we need to do is find tangent. So tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. We've already color coded all these. We know exactly what to write here. Opposite, that's that yellow one right across our angle A, right across from our reference angle, over the adjacent. So there's the one that's right across, 32. That's the opposite, over the adjacent, which is this one, 24. And remember, adjacent means it's the one right next to it. And we can reduce this fraction now I can divide them both by 8, and I get 4/3. All right. So if you need to, go back and watch this again. No shame in having to watch this again. You could even copy down some notes if you want to, but otherwise you're done with this video.